Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Last weekend, a fire broke out along Highway 412 in Beaver County. The winds blew the fire north 29,000 acres before firefighters successfully extinguished it on Monday. Now SUNUP's Dave Deacon takes us to Beaver County to see the damage and to learn how we can help those affected.
This past weekend, wildfire moved across Beaver County, and Lauren, let's talk about how much of Beaver County was impacted by the fire.
Just a little over 29,000 acres was burnt, and again, the conditions they've been warning for some time, winds and low humidities, and it just set up for the perfect type of deal, and it took off and down around Highway 412 and ended up at Beaver there soon after.
And the track has been 18 and then about another 5, so I mean it was a long run of a fire.
It really was. 30 to 5, maybe 40 mile an hour gusts, and it was a situation where when they would flank the fire, it would actually reignite. So it was a very difficult fire to try to stop the advancement of it. At this point in time, nobody's reported any livestock losses. It's just just amazing.
The fire actually made it to the edge of the city of Beaver, and there was some damage there.
There was a few houses right on the far southwest side of Beaver. The school, softball, baseball fields burnt, and part of the football field burnt. So yes, but it something we've been concerned about for some time, and the conditions were there and it happened. So,
and there are already donations coming in from all over the country and showing up in Beaver.
Yes, I mean that's what we've been busy this morning trying to coordinate various, mostly hay at this point in time. But I'm getting calls that later on we'll need some fencing material. And of course, the families that lost their homes were people that's addressing that issue too.
And this is a process that's going to take a little bit of time to get past, but it's already started and it's starting to rebuild.
It's sad to say the last few years we've kind of we weren't directly, well, we were, but
right.
The headquarters and stuff was located in another county, and they're assisting us. They were on the phone this weekend. Here, you need to do this, you need to do that. So we've had a tremendous amount of help, and neighbors and faraway neighbors. It's just amazing, the people that want to participate. No loss of life, and just some buildings and a lot of grass and a lot of fence.
Speaking of that grass, we're looking out over this land here, part of the 29,000 acres. With a couple of good rains, it should start changing the landscape.
It's amazing. As John Weir would say, this country was designed to withstand fire, and it will. Earlier we talked about possibility of moisture this weekend. By the end of March, you won't hardly recognize this. It'll be very green. So.
And as far as donations, if people want to help, they can contact the Beaver County Extension Office in a couple of ways.
Yes, we're kind of trying to be a coordination point, use our website and our Facebook page and stuff to kind of direct people to the right direction. So.
Okay, thank you very much, Lauren. And for more information on those sites, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Bob Hunger, our extension wheat pathologist, joins us now. Bob, we want to talk about how things are looking in Oklahoma mid-March. But first, tell us what we're seeing here and kind of how the science has evolved over time.
Well, this is one of the real success stories with the wheat breeding program here at Oklahoma State, because a variety like this has shown up this year, hit very hard by a virus disease called the wheat soil-borne mosaic, wheat spindle streak mosaic complex. And it's a virus that is brought into the seedlings in the fall by a soil-borne fungal-like organism, and then the symptoms are expressed in the spring. And the reason you don't hear much about this anymore is because practically all of the varieties that are released have good genetic resistance to this virus disease complex. And so they appear like the variety on the right there that is nice deep green and doesn't show any difficulties with it, as opposed to the yellowing and mosaic pattern in the leaves here.
Great success story, but there's still work to do. You are seeing some diseases this spring?
Oh yes, there's some down here at the end of the field that we can go look at.
Okay. Bob, what are you seeing here?
Well, in this variety strip here, we found stripe rust, which is shown here on this leaf. It has those real kind of orangish colored spores or pustules with orangish colored spores inside of it. And it's at a very low incidence in here, but there is some stripe rust in here, which people should be watching for now as the weather's starting to get more moist and temperatures are getting more optimum.
And you're keeping your eye on a couple of other areas too.
Yes, there's a number of different areas that are showing various diseases. One of those is powdery mildew, which is an early season foliar disease of wheat. And then a lot of the leaf spotters, tan spot and septoria, are showing up. All of this is on the lower leaves of the plants. But with this kind of weather, it'll definitely be spreading.
What is the prevalence around the state? Obviously we're in Stillwater, but are you seeing things or hearing things from producers around Oklahoma?
Yeah, overall the incidence of foliar diseases is still extremely low, but I have been getting more reports from southern Oklahoma, south central Oklahoma of powdery mildew and the leaf spotters and a little bit of stripe rust. So far I have not heard of anything of leaf rust at this point, but it'll come with the weather.
With all this in mind, any management tips at this stage?
No, well, of course, management would have been to think about your variety selection last fall for varieties that have resistance to the different diseases that fit your system, no-till versus clean-till, so on and so forth. But now that the varieties are set, the option management would be to use a fungicide if that's needed. And so you need to scout for these diseases and see if they're there, and then use a fungicide if appropriate to help manage that disease.
We appreciate the update. Of course, keep us posted and we will see you again soon.
Will do.
Thanks a lot.
Hi, Wes Lee with the weekly Mesonet Weather Report. Spring officially begins next week, but according to the fruit trees, it has already began. Everything from apricots to pears are in full bloom in the southern half of the state. Unfortunately, most of the state is still several weeks away from the last average freeze date. This map shows the average last freeze in Oklahoma City to be around April 10th for the 30 years between 1981 and 2010. But there is still hope for a decent fruit crop. In the last decade that just ended, the OKC Mesonet site only dropped below freezing after March 14th on 7 out of 10 years. If we can make it to next Saturday without a freeze, and the long-range models predict we will, the chances for OKC increase to 50-50. To date, the last hard freeze for most of the state was on the morning of March 6th. Here we see the lighter blue shaded areas got down into the mid-20s. For the most part, it looks like the fruit was able to survive this day with minimal damage. For peaches, this table shows that it takes temperatures well below freezing to severely injure the crop while it is still in the bud or bloom stage. Apples and pears are even more cold tolerant. Now here's Gary with a look at next week's forecast.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, early spring in Oklahoma, when things can certainly change in a hurry. But sometimes the more they change, the more they stay the same. Let's see what I'm talking about. So the thermometer is changing. The temperatures are going up and up, it seems, as we go through March. But the drought is remaining the same. Even though we got a little bit of rainfall, we still have that area of moderate drought across southwest Oklahoma and the surrounding area with abnormally dry conditions. And then we have that moderate to severe drought up in the western panhandle. So things are changing, but things are staying the same. Now, I think this is going to change, but if we don't get some good rains up into central Oklahoma, I'm afraid we're going to see those drought conditions spread into that area as well. As you can see from this percent of normal rainfall map from the Mesonet for the last 30 days, we generally have less than 50% of normal rainfall across much of central Oklahoma, and that, of course, that extends all the way up into east central Oklahoma. But a large part of the state for the last 30 days is definitely below normal in precipitation. Now here's where that change is coming in. We do see from the 8 to 14 day outlook, this is for March 18th through the 24th. So for much of next week, we see a big trough of low pressure digging into the western half of the United States, and that comes in the form of that increased odds of below normal temperatures across that area. You can see those dark blues out to our west. But we can also see on the precipitation outlook map for the same time frame, increased odds of above normal precipitation across much of the United States. Again, as that large trough of low pressure across the western U.S. starts to rotate across the United States, it will bring us some cooler air and also some increased chances of some rain and possibly some storms. Of course, it's springtime in Oklahoma, so we always have to watch out for storms. So again, more chances to get rid of that drought, the persistent drought across parts of Oklahoma, and keep drought from spreading into other areas of Oklahoma. So that's it for next time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
It's been another interesting week for prices across the country. And Kim, where are we with the ag commodity prices right now?
They're going down. You look at wheat, that price, and looking at harvest prices, I think that's the most important one to talk about. In mid-February, it was $4.77. This last week is $4.21. That's down 56 cents. You look at corn, again out to harvest delivery, $3.75 in mid-January. It's down to $3.47. That's a 28-cent decline. Soybeans, again, start at mid-January. You could forward contract for $8.75. It's down to $7.97 this week. That's down 78 cents. And cotton, just looking at that harvest contract for cotton in mid-January of 71 cents. It's down to 61 cents now, a 10-cent decline. Now, the basis on every one of those were steady. All that decline was in the markets.
So usually whenever we hear of prices moving in that direction, it's because there's usually more supply than what we need. How much of this is contributed because of that, but then also the news about the coronavirus?
Well, the coronavirus is definitely having a negative impact on the market, but we don't know how much. You look at wheat, last year's production, 1.92 billion bushels, projected to be 1.84. The ending stocks for wheat, 965 a million bushels down to 777. So you think you'd have higher prices, but if you look at the world production is projected to be 28.3 billion bushels, up from a record 28.1 this year. So higher world supply. I think we know that our wheat price is determined in the United States. Corn, on the other hand, is 13.7 billion last year's harvest, projected to be 15.5 next year. You're looking at corn ending stocks, 1.9 billion bushels up to 2.6 billion bushels. Significantly more corn, and you'd expect lower prices there. Soybeans, it's a different story. Production 3.6 billion this year, 4.2 next year. Higher production, but with the China, if we can get that beans moving into China, they're looking at ending stocks going from 430 million bushels down to 320. So you'd expect higher prices and probably a bigger impact because there's a lot more uncertainty there on soybeans on getting them into China. With cotton, production down, both the United States and the world, 20.1 million bales this year, down to 19.5. Lower ending stocks, 5.4 million bales, down to 5.3. So it's a mixed bag there, and I think you got both the market and Corona impacting these prices.
When it comes down to it, prices haven't been overly great for a long time. Some producers may not be too enthusiastic about those prices. What advice do you have for Oklahoma producers when it comes to preparing for the future?
Well, we'll see what happens with the coronavirus, but the world is developing. You got the former Soviet Union countries, you got South American countries, you've got Eastern European countries. Their economies have been improving, their technology has been increasing. It increases the risk, not just the risk, but the competition for our products. I would say that's going to continue probably for at least the next 5 years. And then I think on these commodities, probably consumption will catch up with and maybe surpass production, and we'll get improved prices. But I'd say for the next 4 or 5 years, given good weather, that our prices are going to probably stay in these relatively low ranges.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Even though we're still in the midst or in the latter part of the spring calving season, we're only a few weeks away from the start of the spring breeding season for those spring calving herds here in the Southwest. That means it's time to make an appointment with your local large animal veterinarian to have the bulls given a breeding soundness exam. And I think that's very important that we do that each year. You know, there's some old data that comes from Colorado back in the 60s and 70s where they looked at the information from over 10,000 bulls, and they found that 1 out of every 6 actually did not pass a breeding soundness exam. And that could be pretty costly if those 1 out of 6 happens to be in your herd, and could be a situation where you'd lose a certain percentage of your calf crop the following year. So that's why you'd want to have those bulls tested to make sure that they're ready to do the job for which you've purchased them. A breeding soundness exam should have 4 major components. Number 1 is just the general condition of the bull, where the veterinarian will look at such things as the eyes, the feet and the legs, the general body condition, the general health of the bull. Then there will be a examination of the reproductive tract, both an internal exam and an external exam of the reproductive tract, to make sure that all the organs that are involved with the production of semen, the delivery of the semen, are in good shape, good health, and can do the job. And then finally, the 4th component of the breeding soundness exam is where a sample of semen is taken and looked under a microscope to evaluate the percentage of the cells that are forwardly motile and the percentage of the cells that are normal in shape. And those things all should pass before the bull is given what's given a satisfactory report in terms of that breeding soundness exam. Now, if any one of those 4 levels of the exam, they find the bull to not meet the minimum standards, then they'll probably list the bull as classification deferred. And that means that he needs to be brought back in 3 to 4 weeks to be checked again. That's especially true of young bulls. Those that are a year of age to maybe 18 months of age, we don't want to go ahead and cull a bull based on the first exam, because those young bulls may change quite a little bit in their maturity in just 3 to 4 weeks. And so a second exam should be necessary. Older bulls, if they fail that first exam, and certainly if they fail a second exam, then we probably want to go ahead and market them and not try to use them in our herd for breeding purposes. Have those bulls tested before this breeding season. Do it in time so that if your bull fails, you have time to go to one of the production sales and replace him and have him ready then for the upcoming breeding season. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
We're joined now by Daryl Peel, our livestock marketing specialist. Daryl, of course, the big news is the coronavirus and the widespread impacts, including the agricultural markets. Have we ever experienced anything like this before?
You know, we really haven't. This is unprecedented. We've had lots of shocks in markets, including cattle markets, but most of those things were different in several fundamental ways. Most of the things that impact us are specific events. They happen, and then you move past them, you deal with them, you recover from them. So think of the packing plant fire in 2019, or even all the way back to the first BSE case in 2003. And in retrospect, it was relatively easy after those events to sort of see your way out of them. This is a much different situation. It's evolving. We have so much uncertainty about when does it actually reach its peak in terms of how bad it's going to be. So timing is a question, and then beyond that, it's not going to end abruptly. It's going to be a process to get back out of it on the other end. So it's a very different thing.
In those times of uncertainty, what type of guidance do you have for producers? Is it really day by day?
Well, it really is. Obviously, this is a situation that's extremely dynamic, so it's going to change. Right now, for example, we have producers that have to pull cattle off a wheat pasture. There's a very strict deadline. Something's got to be done. Decisions have to be made. And, you know, so what can you say about that? Well, obviously, we're in it now. It's a bad situation. The markets have taken a hit. Is there any option here to sort of hold on and try to outweight this? And I think the answer in the short run is probably not. So if you've got to move cattle, if you're trying to buy time for 2 weeks or even a month, I'm not sure that anything can happen that would sort of allow any significant end to this thing in the next 30 to 60 days for sure. So I think you just have to kind of take your lumps, do what you have to do, and then start thinking a little bit longer term in how you deal with the consequences of that.
With all this in mind, how do you see the situation a little later in the year?
You know, in some ways, to me, that's the most uncertain part. I mean, in the short run, it's less uncertain simply because it's bad, and I don't think anything can make it less bad. But 3 to 6 months out, or maybe 2 to 9 months out, that's when it's really uncertain. At some point, we presumably will peak in terms of how bad it gets, and we'll start thinking about sort of recovery after that. But in the meantime, what does a producer do? It's a very difficult situation, I think, in that time frame to sort of anticipate how to even approach this thing in terms of sort of how defensive to get. For some producers, that may mean that we need to really start assessing the financial consequences. How long can we go before this turns into a serious financial thing? And maybe that means that we need to start sooner rather than later to work with lenders and other folks to sort of make sure we get through this and minimize the damage before we even think about going beyond that and kind of getting back to business as usual.
Kind of play out those scenarios. Okay, Daryl, we appreciate your perspective, and we will see you again soon. Thank you.
You bet.
We're standing in an area where there was some commercial burning going on. And John, why did this company want to, use prescribed fire?
Well, so this is OSU lands, and it's lands that that the university manages, owns. And so again, they started thinking, we need to do something with it. So they come in and cut all the cedars off of it, done a bunch of mechanical work. So again, spent a lot of money on mechanical removal of cedar, trying to get it back. And as with any landowner that's considering that, if you don't follow up mechanical cedar control with fire, you're pretty much just wasting your time and your money, because the cedar is going to come back probably within 6 to 10 years. You're going to have just as much cedar cover as you had right before you cut.
Why continue to do it? Why instead of just doing it once?
So again, because fire is not a one-time deal. It's not a one-shot process. There's really nothing that's one-shot, because we're dealing with a living system out here, and it's always changing and always moving. Granted, a lot of times the change is slow, and it takes multiple years before you ever really see a change, but it's always changing. Things aren't static out here. So again, if you come in, do mechanical harvest of cedars, get them all down, get them all out, and thinking you're done with it, and then run one fire through there, you've done a lot of good with that. But again, within a few years after that one fire, you're still going to have stuff start to come back in. So again, fire is a repeated process that went on historically, and it again should go on now repeatedly. And that's what we call fire frequency. It's how frequent do you put fire back on the land.
It is a time that producers and landowners are using more prescribed fire, more prescribed, burn associations are going to be having things. So what do you guys have going on right now, and what should people who are interested in, using this tool, what should they start to be considering this time of year?
Yeah, prescribed fire season's getting pretty much getting ramped up to getting started in full swing. Again, we've had guys, I know of landowners here that have been burning since right after the first of the year, scattered all around. Again, you see a lot more fires start in southeast Oklahoma earlier because they green up earlier, and it slowly moves this way to the northwest part of the state. So, but again, like I said, there's a lot of people already burning all over the state, different places. Again, anytime's a good time to burn. Again, just go through the planning process of it. Don't just walk out there and think this is a good day to burn and we're going to burn. Everybody needs to go through that planning process, plan it, get everything ready, fire breaks equipment, notify the right people, and again, have a safe, effective burn that way.
All right, thanks, John. If you'd like some more information on prescribed fire, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Despite being inexpensive today, did you know that sugar was once reserved for the extremely wealthy? Sugar is probably one of the most common and well-known food ingredients. Historians believe that the first species of sugarcane to be domesticated was Saccharum officinarum in New Guinea. However, it has been suggested that additional species may have been domesticated at approximately the same time in areas such as India and Indonesia. In fact, the first definitive written record of sugar production occurs in a Hindu religious document called the Discourse on Moral Consciousness. Historians also believe that Arabic farmers improved upon the Indian techniques for cultivating sugarcane and producing sugar. Arabic merchants are thought to have then introduced sugar to Europe between 700 and 900 AD. It's interesting to note that because of its great expense and rarity, sugar would have been used exclusively as a spice or condiment in cooking at this time. In other words, it would have been used to subtly change the flavor of a food, rather than outright plainly sweetening it. It should go without saying that modern consumers also enjoy sugar, although it is much more common and much less expensive, which has led to occasional overindulgence. Our desire for sugar runs all the way from ancient history to the modern day, and manufacturers continue to innovate to meet our sweet expectations. For more information, please visit sunup.okstate.edu or fapc.biz.
That'll do it for us this week. A reminder that you can go to sunup.okstate.edu to learn how you can help those affected by the wildfires in Beaver County, as well as find other resources about wildfire available through Extension. I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.